Welcome back to Therapist Uncensored. I'm Ann Kelly.
And I'm Sue Marriott.
And we just got finished, literally an hour ago, with our virtual launch. And I think I could speak for both of us. We are so overwhelmed and touched.
So we birthed this baby book. And I swear to you, beyond our wildest imaginings, I can't remember, somehow it started where that we were like, oh, we should invite some of the former guests to the online launch. Long story short, we had the most incredible community show up for us, both as audience members, over 300 people RSVP'd, and as our invited guests. I'm still like stunned.
Yeah, we decided to start, we were just going to start this episode off. And we just stopped like, wait, maybe we just really need to let you guys in on this experience because it's so authentic.
Yeah. So Carol George started it off and kind of told some stories about Mary Main and kind of pushing back on Mary Main and having different ideas than her. And of course, Mary Main is attached to Ainsworth and Bowlby. And she talked about actually reading, when Bowlby was alive, reading Bowlby's letters and being part of discussion through letters with John Bowlby, because they didn't have fax and they didn't have computers. It was, this was a thing that was exciting and fun, was that there was all this fangirling and fanboying happening among the panelists.
Yes. That was so fun. It was really fun. You mentioned Deborah Jegovich. What was fun is that we haven't gotten her on the podcast yet, but she, like everyone that's read anything about attachment has read her research.
Yes.
And she has impacted how we see and what we know about it. And she and Carol George have worked together, and David Elliott was there and has researched and used their work. And so to like have them all talking.
To me, one of the things that really touched me is as people kind of went around and were a little bit talking, you and I were just talking about this. There were a few personal stories about their history with me. And like Debbie Jacobitz and I having done a workshop together. Tina Payne Bryson and I meeting many, many years ago, studying directly with Dan Siegel. And she just totally remembered it. And, the Beverly Hills Club and blah, blah, blah. And with Bonnie Baden on it, Stan Tatkin. We were all in that same cohort. And there were several little stories like that were... Sheena Young told an incredible story. And Linda Tai, who people were practically applauding when she spoke because everybody was like so anticipating, what is she going to say? Because she's so beautiful. And she ended up singing a song. She sang a song about a tree, which was really meaningful to me on a number of levels. But that was just what inspired her. Glyceria wasn't able to come, but her and her partner in crime, Deborah Chapman Finley. So Deborah was there. And Deborah spoke about helping us with the chapter that had to do with race and systems. Glyceria and Deborah helped us with that. And that was the hardest chapter that we wrote in the book. So it was really good that she was happy. They weren't going to let us off.
Yeah.
So for them to be happy, we were very happy with that.
Well, one of the things I love that we talked about too, because just about everybody, most of the individuals there have been in the process of writing books or articles. And I think it was it Ariana Schwartz that was talking, I can't remember. One of them I think it was her. Yes, it was. Talking about how anytime you write something, it is this interaction effect of how much you're growing as you write, because that's what we spoke about on there. And it's so true. And these people that were on there have all deeply impacted our thinking along the way and our growth as individuals.
We're different. Having written, we literally are different.
Right. We're different by all of those individuals and how they've helped us grow and challenge. And then to feel like we've had an impact on them was kind of really beyond expectation to really feel it. And it was really touching.
It was really incredible. So we won't keep naming names. It's not the point about the special names. It's more that this community came out and gave us the feeling of like, wow, this is incredible. A bunch of people showed up. There was a lot of chat and Q&A, which is wonderful. Like, there's a historic thing. I mean, I would say it's rather historic to have all of these attachment researchers and these clinicians and people that have been reading one another and meeting one another. And I really love, Anne, that it was you and I that helped bring this together and bring, it was... I don't know. It really felt special.
Also very touched that Laura Gottlieb came.
That's right.
Kristen Neff.
Kristen Neff, that's right.
One of the things she said that was touching is she said that she wished she'd had the book when she was first learning about attachment. So people like that who we've been studying with or under, like, feel like they've had an effect by something we've done, it's kind of like mind-blowing.
And Laura Reagan has been so steady for us. I called it Trauma Chat, but love her. And if you haven't heard her podcast, we really encourage it. One of the things that we did was we collected everybody's bios and all of their latest work. And we'll make that available in the show notes, not so that you can see the list of names, although that was part of what was so amazing, but so that you can see everybody's newest work. And we definitely, through the whole thing, kind of wanted to support everybody doing that.
Last episode, we talked about the dedication, I think. Then we talked about the first quarter of the book. So we're going to talk about the second part. And actually, the second part of the book is, one of my favorites. Although I think the third part takes the cake. But the second part of the book was one of my favorites because it's really talking about, we just dove right into really helping people, I hope, understand how to warm up blue activation or cool off red activation.
But why did you like it so much?
I think because I felt really connected to the journey of each one, like when we hit blue or when we hit red or when people we work with do. And it was a passion of making all the first part come alive. That's what it was. It's like that really like making, the first quarter of the book, I guess it's a little bit more the first quarter, but you're really learning about the body and the science. And then the work of the rest of the book is making that part feel really alive.
And what Anna's saying is really true. It's like what one of the things she does is she kind of like closes her eyes and she gets into herself and she connects with her entire history. I mean, I don't know exactly your process, but you begin to channel something. And then once you connect to it, then you're able to like just speak and articulate what it's like to be with someone, what they need. And we were able to really do this in this section. So some of your clinical skills, I think, were really like shining. And one of the things I like about this section is it begins to talk directly to the to the reader. Whereas the first part is what we call the brainy part, as we said. And it's very, very important because it really ties it to the research and the science, and it brings it up to date, all the things that needs to happen. But you could just open up the book and start on chapter 8. And I'm not advocating for that, but I thought it would be helpful to just read so you can get just a little bit of a feel for kind of the tone and kind of what it sounds like. All right, warming up blue activation. Why dwell on the past? That was a long time ago. It's over. Sure, my dad was hard on me, but I needed it. We should all do more of that kind of discipline. Kids are spoiled these days. Don't worry. It's fine. I'll fix it. If you show your cards, people will take advantage of you. Do these remind you of anyone? Whether they sound like you or someone you care about, learning about blue-leaning activation, i.e., the tendency to avoid emotional intimacy and vulnerability, will help. Maybe someone significant in your life asked you to read this chapter. If so, we will explain why. We will explain why they are bugging you to read this and give you some things that might help you understand one another. There are many of us out there skeptical of therapy-related things, and if that is you, we think you'll appreciate that the gist of this book is about regulating emotions and being closer to one another without emotional drama or high defensiveness. The bottom line is, even if you are a tad more isolated or lonely than you wish to be, or have people asking for more connection than you know how to give, then learning about what we call blue activation will likely help you. How's it sound to read it?
It's fun. It's fun to hear. Well, and I think that we talked a lot in writing that chapter about helping people who kind of lean blue feel invited in. And I did imagine, for me, I imagine some of the, just over the years and years and years of working with people that lean blue. And I also imagine how often they're going to be handed the book. So I guess what I'm saying is that I can imagine that a part of the motivation for writing this book is to be able to have an accessible book that whether you lean red or whether you lean blue or tie-dye, you could find yourself in it. And that's so important. And I also imagine that it's going to be fewer blues running out to initially buy the book, and it's going to be more green and reds.
Was like, maybe somebody just handed you this and like, yeah, maybe this could help you, hon.
And yeah, so even thought about like, it might be very frequent that his blue is going to turn to that chapter to start.
Well, that's exactly the way we kind of have it set up. I mean, I'm not going to keep reading, but it goes on, just the next sentence. Many of us were taught that vulnerability equals weakness, making it hard, blah, 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 blah. So you get the idea. And we explain in the book that we aren't actually taught it. Our parents didn't give us a lesson. It's so much deeper than that. And we explain it in really clear terms about how it was adaptive and important. And one of the things I love, you're really good at this, which is reminding everybody that the stoicism in kind of avoidance and dismissing states of mind, the shrugs, the eye rolls, the lack of interest, the lack of memory about important emotional things, that those are all things, not the person being a jerk, but really are biologically tilted. And there's actually a shift in the way they process information. And knowing that it's not to let them off the hook, it's more of like helping you accurately read them. And I think it'll help you be less activated by it on the other side.
Yes, that's a really great way to say it. Because it's so easy to take those things in personally, especially like you mentioned, and we do talk about in the book, kind of giving you a better idea of what happens in your mind and your body and the research around it. But that sometimes individuals that lean blue really don't hold that kind of memory for really important things. So when they're not remembering important things, it isn't because they don't care. And that can be a core of a lot of conflict for people. Because if you run green, so more secure, I guess we should get out of just the colors, more secure or preoccupied, relationships and the memory of relationship important events is there and shows up in your mind. So if somebody's forgetting, it's really easy then to project onto them that they don't care. Because if you were to forget when you have that good memory, that's what it would mean. But that actually isn't the case for some people, that the way that their mind and body grew up was to de-escalate that kind of information. And so it's really not as present.
Right. There's a deactivation of the attachment system. It was just encoded. It wasn't even taught. It wasn't even learned. It was just literally encoded in the body very, very early on. So again, this isn't to let them off the hook, that the idea is actually more to put the person who has this wiring on the hook to get curious and to begin to get wondering about their own internal states, wondering about other people's internal states. And then one of the things that I like about what we did was we got really concrete, because this is associated with kind of being concrete. And we gave like very specific instructions, like what we're talking about is that it can be threatening when somebody begins to feel emotion, when this is something that you have been wired to avoid, right? So we're walking them through, okay, your person is having emotion, so just do this. It said, use phrases such as, tell me more about that. These are things that wouldn't normally happen, right? Why do you think that is? What's your favorite part? What has you so worried? In other words, we're instructing them how to just engage and stay engaged rather than be deer in the headlights. Right. And then it goes on about like helping them process negative emotions so that we're desensitizing them so it becomes less scary.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good example to give you a sense. We will keep going about this one. Let's go to the next chapter, but it's a really, hopefully, our intent, and so far we've been given the feedback, that it is a non-judgmental, inviting way and not a finger-waggy way to learn about your body. So let's jump to the next chapter, which I love the title too. We're talking about cooling down red activation.
So read to us. Yeah, just start with the beginning of the chapter.
Those of us who lean red are typically eager to learn and explore how to improve our relationships. We want to analyze and dig in. So we don't need to spend much time convincing you that deconstructing your tendencies will be helpful. We can jump right in. We'll say why we said that. You're going to find the beginning of chapter, speaking of what we were talking about with the last chapter, we do spend some time helping somebody who leans blue decide it's worthwhile to read this, because often it's more about how do we calm down that red person over there. And so with this one, when we lean red, we kind of know there's anxiety there, and we know, and we're pretty motivated to maintain relationships, right?
Yeah, we didn't have to sell it.
Yeah.
They're going to be the ones reading the book, and they're going to probably want to read, not they, right? When we lean in when we can fall into a preoccupied state, then we get highly activated related to our attachment system. So then we're very interested in the minds of other people, and we're very interested in our own mind. So your point is that we don't have to sell it or convince someone to begin to engage in this process.
Well, and it strikes me, just the next title we did with all three, and we won't go into all the details, but we have sections of strengths of red leaners, streaks of blue leaners, and strengths of tie-dye, because this isn't about pathologizing. This is how our body leans when we get activated, learning about why we do that. But it also, our learning brings us a lot of strengths. And then I think one of my most favorite parts of all three chapters, of course, is not shocking, but common red relational dynamics and ways to resolve them. The first one is having trouble knowing and expressing our needs. I can really relate to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, pot, kettle.
It's true. It's true that when I'm activated, and often my activation happens around my perception that somebody else is going to experience. I think you would agree. I don't have as much activation about the fact that I'm going to get rejected or judged.
Yes, I agree.
Rejection and judgment doesn't really scare me a whole lot. But somebody I love feeling rejected.
That's true. I'll send you over the edge.
Yes.
Oh wait, then the next heading is over focusing on feelings, feeling let down or disappointed. So there it is.
If I imagine other people, like if I imagine one of our kids or my siblings or somebody I care about feeling that, then that's what will move me sliding over into the red more, which means that I lose contact with myself. So then I become more preoccupied with managing that feeling in somebody else. And so we really work on helping me and you and those of you that can relate to that, whether it's your activation because you're fearing of yourself feeling disappointed or other people. There's ways that we can learn to hold ourselves and recognize that and calm that down. And we talk about that in the book.
That's totally true. That's totally true. And then the last chapter of this section is resolving the unresolved. And we do go into this. It's the most confusing category of attachment, which is disorganized. It's been called disorganized, disoriented, dysregulated, unresolved, cannot classify. Many different names. They all kind of mean a little bit something different. But what we do is we pull all of that empirical research and then we make it understandable for to make it clinically useful, right?
Right. And so what this chapter is, in getting away from all of that language, all of us have experienced hardship, and some of us have experienced trauma. Many of us have experienced trauma or pockets of trauma. And some of us have had a deeper sense of disconnection or fearful trauma growing up in circumstances that left us living more in a disconnected way. So what we're talking about is recognizing your pockets of trauma and how, or if you live a little bit more into it, how does that come out in your everyday life, how to recognize it, and then what kind of things you can engage in to be able to, again, how does it show up in your relationship? And you might be surprised. Many of you out there might be reading this and go, oh my gosh, my compulsive need to caretake everyone all the time. It could be related to just red activation, but it could also be a trauma response. And there's lots of different ways to recognize that trauma shows up in our relationship that we think of it as personality quirks, or maybe we externalize it to the hardship in our environment. But this chapter is about turning some light bulbs on to going, oh, there's some really important ways this comes out in our lives. And here's some things about, again, how to find some good resolution.
And with so much love. I mean, I am proud of us about this, but that we work very hard to not be shaming It's not even hard work. It's just because it's not how we feel. And tie-dye in particular, because it's often associated with trauma and a lot of shame. So I feel good about that. And again, I think we've mentioned before, but there's some characters that are interwoven through the whole book as a way of watching them move through a process. And in the tie-dye chapter, there is a character named Beth that we follow. And in this particular chapter, we go into Beth's history.
And that's definitely your specialty, is being able to conceptualize the inner workings in a deeply insightful and compassionate way when somebody has such a long history of trauma that it's embedded.
Right. And it's not rocket science probably to figure out that I relate to Beth. Certainly I've had my own journey of pain and trying to get out of it, and nightmare, there's nightmares in this one. It's not a direct correlation by any stretch, but there's definitely a part of me that is like very protective, like mama bear protective of anybody. So if you're listening and you're somebody that can dysregulate in this way, dissociate, have been overwhelmed with trauma, and just, man, you have got my mama bear going. Like, nobody needs to mess with you. That's all I'm saying. And you're awesome, and it's possible, and keep doing the work.
You were using the term tie-dye, and I've used red and blue pretty just like off the top. And it strikes me that with a book, we're going to have some new listeners, and that those terms might like, what the hell are they talking about? They keep talking about red and blue. We've kind of described it, but tie-dye, I just wanted to come back. We've talked about the warming up the blue was the kind of disconnected individual that has grown up that way, a little bit more avoidant. And that red is those that get more activated, warm, and a little bit more anxious. Tie-dye, the reason we use the color tie-dye is that it's a mixture of those strategies. It can have secure green, it can have red, it can blue. So when you hit in a more traumatized way, sometimes we can see that. So that's what it was. It struck me that when you kept saying tie-dye,
it's a mix of strategies. It can feel confusing and overwhelming.
We describe it as a puddle, a tie-dye puddle, because when you hit it, it can feel confusing. And we all have our little pockets of tie-dye. Most of us do, I will say. We don't necessarily live there. So anyway, when you get the book, you'll understand the colors more. But I just realized that was what it was. I just want to say, what are we talking about?
Aren't y'all relieved?
I'm relieved. Okay.
Whew, that would have been incomplete.
All right. So that's it.
Okay. Then next episode, we're going to do part 3. I mean, the last part. And then the book launch will be over. We are both very happy the book launch is going to be over. Yes, and I'm imagining y'all will also be happy. If you have the book and you're following the book, please get on Amazon or on Goodreads or wherever you get your books and leave us a rating and review for Secure Relating, Holding Your Own in an Insecure World. It helps others discover it. Yes. And we're in this period that it matters a lot. They're doing algorithms or whatever to pick up like what books are being excited about. So,
all right. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you for joining all those that attended our virtual launch. Thank you so much. And by the way, we recorded that virtual launch. So if you're interested in seeing all those people that we talked about, that maybe you read about or heard about, or once you read the book, you'll hear about their work, then we have that recorded, and we'll have it.
Jump on our mailing list, which you can get to on our website, or just check back on the website at some point, or just Facebook or whatever.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you around the bend.